Your sister made us so proud. Dad toasted. The whole family laughed, staring at me. When will we ever say that about you? I put my glass down and said it calmly. Every face froze. The dining room glowed with golden light, clink of silverware, mixing with laughter that did not quite reach me. Dad lifted his glass-high eyes sparkling with pride, as he turned toward my sister. To the daughter who made us so proud, he said, voice booming with approval. Everyone clapped. Mom dabbed at her eyes. My sister blushed like she had earned a crown, then his gaze slid across the table and landed on me. His smile lingered, sharp, rehearsed, and he added, pausing just long enough for silence to gather. When will we say that about you? Table hushed, forks frozen, mid-air. I leaned back in my chair, lips curving into a calm smile. Inside, though I felt the weight of decades balancing on one sentence, I had never spoken aloud. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The laughter around the table thinned, like music cut mid-note, glasses clinked politely, but the air had shifted. I could feel it pressing against my skin. Dad's words still echoed. When will we say that about you? It wasn't curiosity, it wasn't hope. It was a verdict wrapped in a smile. A reminder that no matter what I had done, it was never enough, not compared to her. Mom reached for her glass too quickly, her rings catching the candlelight, as if distraction could erase the tension. My sister lowered her gaze, pretending interest in the untouched bread basket. They were all waiting for me to do what I always did. Swallow the sting, let the silence patch over the wound, laugh along like nothing had been said that night. The weight of their applause for her burned heavier than their indifference to me, and I decided not to let it pass. I set my glass down with deliberate care, the stem clicking softly against the wood. My voice didn't rise, didn't crack. It came out steady, almost quiet. Maybe when you stop comparing me to her. The words floated into the silence like a spark in dry grass. Dad's smile faltered, caught halfway between pride and disbelief. Mom shifted in her seat, fingers tightening around her napkin, as if she could squeeze the discomfort into submission. My sister's eyes flipped down to her plate. Lashes, trembling, guilt, and surprise, tangled together. For a moment, no one moved. The chandelier hummed above us. The only sound in a room suddenly too small to contain decades of unspoken truths. They had expected me to laugh it off, to wear the role of quiet shadow. Instead, I handed them a mirror they had spent years avoiding. The silence at the table cracked open a door I had kept bolted for years, and behind it spilled the memories I never invited. My sister's trophies glittering on the mantel, one polished like proof of her perfection. The living room filled with applause when she finished her dance recital. Mom crying into her hands as though she just witnessed history. Me, I had stood at my debate competition, voice sharp, arguments precise. A ribbon placed in my hand by strangers while Dad's seat stayed empty. At home, no one asked how it went. No one cared enough to. I wasn't invisible. I was just never the version they wanted, the one who followed their script, who made them look good to relatives who earned pride without asking for it. Growing up in her shadow wasn't quiet. It was loud with collapse. I never received celebrations that skipped my name, like I had never been part of their story at all. To them, my sister wore an invisible crown that never slipped. Every milestone she touched turned into a family holiday. Her wedding was spoken of like a royal affair. Photos framed in the hallway, her gown described in detail to every guest who visited her new job. Toast-worthy achievement, as if no one else in the world had ever signed an offer letter. Even her smallest victories, learning to cook one dish, buying a new handbag, paraded as proof she was the perfect daughter. Each time Dad raised his glass for her, felt less like praise and more like punishment for me. His pride in her cast a shadow over everything. I was everything I tried to be. I wasn't failing. I was simply measured against someone who was never allowed to fall. In their story, her crown glittered brighter than my existence ever could. They never noticed were the battles I fought in silence. When Mom's health wavered, it was me who drove her to late-night checkups, who sat in sterile waiting rooms holding her coat while she pretended nothing was wrong. When Dad's business slipped, I was the one quietly sending money for bills, covering gaps, he never admitted existed. At work, I earned promotions. No one asked about climbing on my own without applause or speeches. I learned to cook for myself, to pay rent alone, to survive without anyone stepping in to ease the load. But silence never makes headlines in my family. Sacrifices don't get framed. Responsibility doesn't trend on social media, and independence is rarely toasted with champagne. They mistook my strength for detachment, my quiet for lack of worth. And while they cheered for crowns and bouquets, my victories lived, unspoken in the shadows, as invisible to them as I had always been. My sister finally broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. "Dad didn't mean it like that," she said, offering me the kind of defense that sounded more like dismissal. The words slid across the table, meant to patch the wound, but only pressed deeper into it. As I remembered, years ago she had laughed with her friends, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. "She's not the family type." They had all giggled, and she had smiled as if it were harmless. But it wasn't stayed with me sharper than any toast or comparison. Not just my parents. It was heard too. She wore the crown while I wore the labels, dramatic, distant, difficult. As I looked at her now, lowering her eyes into her wineglass, I realized she wasn't just a sister in this story. She had been one of the authors of my erasure all along. Every toast raised for her was another reminder that I was never enough. Each glass of champagne clinked in her honor felt like a gavel slamming down, ruling me guilty of not living the life they had scripted. Dad leaned forward, his jaw tight, but voice softened as though gentleness could disguise the blow. "We just want you to settle down, settle down." The phrase carried the weight of their expectations, their blueprint for who I should have been. I leaned forward to my eyes locked on his. "Or do you just want a mirror version of her?" The question dropped between us like a stone into still water, the ripples spreading across the table. Mom blinked rapidly, my sister pressed her lips into a thin line, and Dad's face hardened into silence. The air felt thick, charged, as if even the chandelier above knew the balance of power had shifted. For the first time, they weren't in control of the narrative. I was. The words were already burning my tongue, and this time I didn't swallow them. I worked twice as hard, just to be noticed half as much. My voice didn't shake, cut. Mom's hand froze midway to her glass, her eyes widening as if hearing me for the very first time. "And every time you praised her," continued, "you erased me." The truth hung in the air, heavier than the chandelier above us. My sister's face cracked, her practiced poise slipping as her eyes shimmered with something dangerously close to shame. Mom reached for a napkin, stabbing at tears. She had pretended for years not to cause. Dad clenched his jaw, the muscles twitching as if he could grind my words into dust before they settled. But it was too late. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, swollen with decades of neglect finally spoken aloud. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just confronting them. I was reclaiming me. I leaned in, letting the quiet stretch until their eyes couldn't look anywhere else but at me. Then I said it calmer stone. "You ask when you'll be proud of me. The real question is, when will you stop being ashamed of who I am?" The words didn't rise like thunder. They felt like a hammer, final and undeniable. My sister's fork slipped against her plate, the scrape louder than any response she could have given. Mom froze, her breath catching in her throat as though she'd been struck. Dad's face went pale, pride drained into something colder, something he couldn't disguise with a smile. The table, once filled with chatter and clinking glasses, sank into a silence so deep. It felt like the walls themselves were listening. For the first time, the silence belonged to me. I let the silence linger. A moment longer, then reached for my napkin and folded it carefully. As though this ending deserved precision, pushing my chair back, I rose to my feet, their eyes following me with a mixture of shock and disbelief. "You don't need to toast me," I said evenly, my voice steady as glass. "I've already learned to raise my own." The words landed softer than anger, but sharper than any scream could have. Mom's lips parted, searching for a line to pull me back. My sister blinked hard, as if wishing the moment could rewind. Dad stayed still, jaw clenched, pride stripped away. I turned without waiting for permission, each step toward the door echoing louder than their applause ever had. And when I walked out, I left them frozen, still holding their glasses, but with nothing left worth raising. Later that week, I sat on a small balcony with a close friend, the night air warm and forgiving. No chandeliers, no polished silverware, no forced applause. Just two glasses clinking softly beneath the stars. We laughed about nothing important, the kind of laughter that doesn't need an audience to feel real. For the first time in years, the sound didn't echo against judgment, belonged fully to me. My phone buzzed with unread messages. I didn't care to open. Pride from them was never coming, and I no longer needed it to breathe. As I leaned back, glass in hand, I realized I had stopped chasing their approval long before tonight. I had simply never admitted it out loud. Family pride was never mine to earn. I thought, smiling at the sky. Self-respect was always mine to claim, and claiming it felt better than any toast ever could.